I'm going to tell you something that still makes my stomach tighten, no matter how many years have passed. If you've ever worked in a hospital, especially in the ER, you know there are moments when your instincts scream louder than any monitor in the room. But this night taught me just how dangerous it can be when someone with authority dismisses what they don't feel like hearing. It taught me how quickly a quiet shift can turn into a test of everything you've ever learned. And it taught me how one rolled pair of eyes can almost cost someone everything. I knew something was wrong the moment the patient walked in. Though walked isn't the right word. Staggered, maybe. He was in his late 30s or early 40s, sweating through his shirt even though the ER waiting room was freezing, trying to crack a joke with his wife who looked like she'd aged 10 years during the drive over. He kept insisting he was fine, that he just needed something for a little stomach bug. But his skin tone wasn't matching the story. His eyes weren't matching the story. And every part of me, every trained part, and every intuitive part, felt the same cold tap on the back of my neck. The kind that says, if you don't move fast, something bad is going to happen. I wish I could say this was the kind of ER where people listened to each other's warnings right away. But we had a resident that night, Dr. H, fresh out of another hospital rotation, smart on paper, confident in a way that wasn't confidence so much as unmanaged ego. He was the kind of doctor who didn't just want to be right. He needed to be right. And he especially needed to be right when the person questioning him wore scrubs instead of a white coat. He didn't see what I saw when the patient finally made it to triage. He barely glanced up from the chart. Just nausea, vomiting, maybe food poisoning. Happens every day, he said. He hadn't even looked at the man's skin long enough to notice the cool, clammy undertone. He hadn't noticed the way the patient kept shifting, as if his body couldn't find a stable position. He hadn't noticed the faint tremor in the fingers, the delayed response to simple questions, the way his wife kept wringing her hands like she was trying to stop her fear from leaking out. When I repeated what I saw, when I said I wanted to draw labs immediately, including a full panel instead of just the basics, Dr. H rolled his eyes so dramatically I'm shocked they didn't get stuck mid-rotation. You nurses always think it's something dramatic, he said, waving his hand like he was shooing a fly. Send him to a bed and give him fluids. I don't want unnecessary labs for a stomach bug. Let's keep things efficient. Efficient. That word has ruined more than a few shifts. I should have walked away. I should have let him do what he wanted, because technically this was his call. But that tap on the back of my neck had turned into a grip. Something about this patient didn't fit. Something was hiding beneath the surface, and I couldn't let it go. So I did what every experienced nurse eventually learns to do. I ordered the labs myself, understanding protocol. Perfectly legal. Perfectly within policy. But doctors like him hated when nurses did that, because it meant acknowledging they weren't the only ones capable of judgment. I got the patient into a bed, hooked him up, started fluids, and kept an eye on him. His wife pulled up a chair and sat so close, her knees touched the rail. I could see she was trying to stay calm, trying not to let him see how scared she was, but her hands kept shaking whenever she thought I wasn't looking. How long has he been feeling sick? I asked. Since this morning, she said. But it got worse so fast. He said it was nothing, but then he could barely stand when we left the house. That matched what I'd seen. Way too fast for simple dehydration. Way too intense for a typical stomach bug. Something was off. Too off. When I checked his vitals again, his heart rate was slightly higher than before, his blood pressure slightly lower, and his breathing just a touch faster. Tiny changes. The kind that someone inexperienced might shrug off, but together, they painted a picture I didn't like. Dr. H walked by just as I was adjusting the patient's nasal cannula. You running a respiratory marathon over here? He joked. I ignored the comment. His vitals are trending in a concerning direction. We need to take this seriously. He sighed like I was interrupting his plans for the evening. He's anxious, that's all. Stop overreacting. I wanted to say something sharp. I wanted to remind him that anxiety doesn't explain the things I was seeing, but I held my tongue. For the moment. Minutes later, I got the notification that the lab specimen had arrived downstairs. I knew it would be at least half an hour before results returned. 30 minutes can go by in a blink when the ER is full of noise and chaos. But that wasn't happening tonight. Tonight, every minute felt like it stretched into 10. The patient groaned suddenly, curling slightly to one side. I moved to his bedside right away. "Where does it hurt?" "All over," he whispered. "But here most," he said, pressing the upper part of his abdomen. Pain there raised red flags. Major red flags. I checked him again. Same trend, but sharper. Heart rate up again. Blood pressure inching down. Skin even cooler. His wife stood up, eyes wide, voice trembling. "Is he okay?" "We're keeping a close watch. I've already sent labs. They'll help us understand what's happening." She nodded, but she didn't look reassured. She looked like someone holding on by a thread. When Dr. H passed by again, I intercepted him. "He's worsening. I want imaging, and I want to prepare for possible escalation." He let out a short laugh. "Imaging? Escalation? For nausea? Come on. You nurses always jump to the worst scenario." The frustration burned in my chest. But before I could respond, another nurse walked up, saying results were starting to populate in the system, too fast for the full panel, so I knew it was the basics first. I opened the chart on the nearest computer. The second line of numbers froze me. His white blood cell count was through the roof. The kind of level that means the body is fighting something hard. The kind of level that you don't ignore if you want to keep your license. And that wasn't even the worst of it. Other values were completely out of range, values that pointed to something dangerous, something that could spiral fast. I didn't walk to Dr. H this time. I marched. He was leaning against the nurse's station, scrolling on his phone. When I told him the results, directly, clearly, with no room for misinterpretation, he looked up at me like he thought I was exaggerating again. But when he opened the chart himself, when he saw those numbers, for a second, his expression dropped. Then the defensiveness snapped back. "That doesn't make sense," he muttered. "He didn't seem that sick." "He is that sick," I said. "And we need to act now." Before he could argue, the patient's monitor beeped loudly from down the hall. We both turned. Heart rate spiking, blood pressure dropping, respiratory rate climbing as his chest worked harder to pull in air. I was already running before the monitor finished its alert. The patient was gripping the rails, face pale, eyes unfocused. His wife was crying now, pleading with him to stay with her. "It's okay," I said gently, though my heart was pounding. "We're right here. We're helping you." I called out for another nurse to bring the emergency meds. My mind was already moving ahead. Next steps, possible complications, what we might need if things deteriorated further. Behind me, Dr. H finally stepped into gear. Ego has a funny way of evaporating when alarms are screaming. "Get imaging stat," he ordered. "Let's page the on-call specialist." I didn't say I told you so, though part of me wanted to. This wasn't the time. This was about keeping a human being safe, not winning. The patient winced again, clutching his abdomen harder. His skin felt even cooler, his breathing more strained. I adjusted his oxygen, monitored his pressure, guided his wife step by step so she didn't panic into making things worse. Everything was happening fast now. Too fast. And just as we were stabilizing him enough to transfer him to imaging, the full lab panel came back. The numbers were bad. Very bad. The kind of bad that explains everything I'd been seeing. The kind of bad that erases any doubt about how severe things truly were. When I read the results, my breath caught. Dr. H's face drained of color as he scrolled through the screen, eyes widening with every line. He wasn't rolling his eyes now. He wasn't dismissing anything. If anything, he looked like someone realizing he'd overlooked the signs written in neon. "This isn't possible," he whispered. "It is," I said quietly, "and it's happening right now." He swallowed hard. "We need to move, immediately." I stayed with the patient as we prepared the transfer, keeping my voice steady so he wouldn't panic more. His wife held his hand tightly, whispering that she loved him, that he just needed to breathe, that he was going to be okay. I kept an eye on both of them, because sometimes family members collapse before the patient does. When we finally moved him toward imaging, the hall felt twice as long as usual. Every sound felt amplified: the wheels of the stretcher, the hiss of the oxygen, the faint moans of the patient trying to stay aware. I kept one eye on the monitors the whole time. I didn't like the numbers. Every step took us deeper into the part of the shift where instinct becomes survival. By the time we reached imaging, the patient was barely able to respond. His wife hovered close, her fingers shaking so violently that I gently guided her back so she wouldn't unintentionally pull on a line. The imaging team rushed to set everything up, and I prepared myself for the worst-case scenario. Not because I wanted to be right, but because ignoring possibilities is how people lose fights they didn't even know they were in. As the test began, the patient's breathing grew shallower. I stood inches from the machine, watching every rise and fall of his chest, ready to intervene the second things turned. And they did. Not gradually. Suddenly. One moment he was breathing. The next, the rhythm changed sharply. The alarms went off. His heart rate dipped. His wife screamed. And I stepped forward, shouting for the crash cart. Because everything that Dr. H had ignored, all the warnings, all the signs, all the instincts, had finally exploded into full crisis. And we were out of time. The alarms didn't just sound. They tore through the imaging room like a siren announcing that whatever time we thought we had was officially gone. I moved before anyone else did, because nurses always do. There's no hesitation when you've seen this pattern enough times to recognize the exact second the body decides it can't compensate anymore. And his body had reached that point. His breathing dropped into shallow pulls, each one weaker than the last, like his lungs were fighting a battle they weren't meant to fight alone. His heart rate dipped into a rhythm that told me we were seconds away from losing control of the situation. His wife cried out his name, trying to get him to look at her, but his eyes were unfocused, glassy, distant, as if he was slipping behind a curtain. I told the imaging tech to stop the scan immediately. They froze, startled, but when they saw the monitor numbers, they scrambled to help. I reached for the emergency equipment we'd brought with us, and another nurse rushed into the room with the crash cart. Everything became a blur of movement, fast, coordinated, almost automatic. You never forget how to switch into that mode. It's survival, for both the patient and the team. "Get the doctor in here now," I said to the nearest staff member. My voice wasn't loud, but it was sharp enough that they knew there wasn't a second to waste. We repositioned him on the stretcher, freeing enough space to access his airway if needed. His wife was near the doorway, shaking so intensely I worried she might collapse. One of the techs stepped over and guided her gently to a chair, trying to calm her while still watching the chaos unfold. She didn't look away, though. She couldn't. People cling to hope with their eyes in these moments, and she was trying to keep her husband anchored to something, anything, before he drifted too far. Dr. H ran into the room breathless, eyes wide. He saw the monitors, and whatever arrogance he had earlier evaporated completely. This wasn't the same man who had rolled his eyes at me just an hour ago. This was someone staring at a crisis he hadn't seen coming, even though it had been screaming in his face from the start. "What happened?" he asked, voice trembling slightly. "He decompensated," I said quickly. "We need to stabilize him now." There was no tone, no anger, no blame in my voice, just urgency. Emotions are luxuries we don't get during these moments. We moved as a unit, nurses drawing up meds, the doctor assessing, me monitoring the vitals and preparing for interventions depending on which direction his body decided to go. His blood pressure kept dropping, slippery and unstable, like trying to hold something heavy with wet hands. His heart rhythm wavered again, threatening another dip. His skin was cold and damp, and the tremor had returned, stronger this time. I started talking to him softly, even though I wasn't sure how much he could hear. Sometimes the voice is what anchors them. Even if they're fading, the voice gives them something to fight toward. "You're okay," I said. "We're right here. Stay with us. Just breathe. We're helping you." His wife sobbed from the corner, covering her mouth to keep herself from screaming. Tears streamed down her face in silent streaks, and I could tell she was saying something under her breath. Maybe a prayer, maybe his name, maybe both. We finally managed to get his pressure to climb. Slightly, but enough to breathe for half a second. Enough to move him out of imaging and back toward a room where we had more equipment, more space, more options. As we rolled him down the hall, the monitors beeped in uneven patterns that kept me on edge. His pulse ox flickered, his breathing hitched. Everything about him felt unstable, like one wrong move would cause another crash. We got him back into the room, and the specialist arrived within minutes. The moment he saw the imaging preview and the lab results, his face shifted. Not surprised, concerned in a way that confirmed everything I had been afraid of. "This is serious," he said. "He needs intervention immediately." Dr. H stiffened, and for a moment I could see the guilt weighing on him. He swallowed hard and nodded, stepping aside to let the specialist take the lead. The patient's wife stepped closer to me, gripping the rail so tightly her knuckles turned white. "Is he going to be okay?" she whispered, almost too afraid to ask. I looked her in the eyes, not with false promises, but with the steady certainty she needed. "We're doing everything right. We caught this in time. He's in good hands now." She nodded, tears still flowing, her breath shaking with each inhale. The next hour was a whirlwind of interventions, adjustments, medications, reevaluations. Every minute mattered. Every decision mattered. And through it all, the patient hovered in that fragile place between spiraling and stabilizing. The team worked with precision, each of us doing exactly what we were trained to do. One wrong judgment earlier in the shift had nearly cost him everything. But now, finally, the right decisions were being made. When his vitals began to stabilize, not just temporarily, but consistently, the entire room seemed to exhale at once. His breathing grew steadier. His color improved. His blood pressure rose enough to make us believe he had crossed back over the threshold where we could fight effectively. His wife leaned against the wall, crying in relief now instead of fear. She mouthed "thank you" toward the room, but her eyes found mine specifically. She didn't need to say anything else. I knew what she meant. Eventually, we transferred him to a higher level of care, where he could be monitored continuously. The team there was ready for him, already reading through his chart and preparing their own plan. When the stretcher disappeared behind the double doors, the hallway fell quiet. I finally felt the tension drain from my body, and I leaned briefly against the wall, letting myself breathe. That's when Dr. H walked up to me. He didn't look like the confident resident from earlier. He looked human, exhausted, shaken, humbled in a way that only a near disaster can teach. "I should have listened to you," he said quietly. "If you hadn't ordered those labs, I don't want to think about what would have happened." I didn't say anything at first. I just let the silence sit. He needed it. "I'm sorry," he added. I was wrong. There it was. The sentence that every experienced nurse hears too late, too rarely, and only after the universe forces someone to learn the hard way. "It's not about who was right," I finally said. "It's about the patient. That's all that matters." He nodded, but I could see the truth in his eyes. Tonight had changed something in him. Maybe just for a while. Maybe for good. But it had changed him. I walked back to the nurse's station, where the rest of the team was catching up on notes and cleaning up from the chaos. Someone handed me a cup of water. Another gave me a look that said what we both knew. This could have been a tragedy. Instead, it became a lesson. Hours later, when the specialist came down to give us an update, I braced myself, ready for anything. He smiled, a tired, grateful smile. "He's stable," he said. "Really stable. He's not out of the woods yet, but he's responding well. You all acted fast. That made the difference." His wife insisted on coming down herself. She walked straight to me, wrapped her arms around me, and whispered, "Thank you," over and over again. Her voice cracked each time, but there was strength in it too, the kind that appears only after someone survives the scariest night of their life. And even though I told her it was a team effort, that we were all just doing our jobs, she shook her head. "You listened," she said. "You saw what was happening before anyone else. Thank you for not giving up on him." That moment stayed with me, still stays with me. Because the truth is, nursing isn't about knowing everything. It's about paying attention. It's about seeing what others overlook. It's about trusting the instincts you've honed through years of being the one who stays at the bedside, who notices the subtle things, who knows a human being's rhythm as well as your own heartbeat. And yes, sometimes it's about standing your ground, even when someone with a title thinks they know better. I've had many shifts since then, many crises, many close calls. But that night remains etched in my memory as the perfect example of why listening matters, why instincts matter, why teamwork matters, why humility, real humility, can change the outcome of a life. And every time I think back to the moment the lab results came back, to the moment Dr. Ch's eyes widened and all his earlier arrogance vanished, I remember that one rolled pair of eyes nearly set the entire course of that night on fire. But one decision, one refusal to ignore the signs, kept a man alive. Thank you for watching this story and staying with me until the end. It means more than you know to share these experiences, because they remind people everywhere how much happens behind those ER doors that most never hear about. If you enjoyed this story and want to support the channel, don't forget to like the video, subscribe, and share it with someone who loves real, emotional medical stories. Your support helps bring more of these experiences to life and helps more people understand the realities behind the scrubs. Thank you again for being here. Until the next story.